when you're ready to start.
Okay. Just give it a few moments, okay? Let people come in. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our Pirkei Avos Shiur Le'ilu Nishmat Harab Avraham Chaim ben Eliezer Yaakov Zecher Tzadik Livracha and Goldie Miriam ben Avraham Chaim Zichrona Livracha. May they intercede on high on behalf of all of us. Over to you, Rabbi Tov.
Pirkei Mishnah Gimel. The third Mishnah, it's a hemshech, a continuation of what Rabbi Gamliel said in the previous Mishnah. And we're already 1 week before Rosh Chodesh Elul, less than a week even. We're in the countdown to Elul, and it's been a great bzchus to learn this Torah, Le'ilu Nishmas Abba Mori, Zatzal, the entire year, and even more so in the holy month of Elul, where Torah is the kli that we use to become closer to Hashem. Torah is that which helps us to cleave to Hashem, a relationship to Hashem, and memeda with everyone else in life. And so here we have it. Rabbi Gamliel said, doesn't even tell us the author of the Mishnah, but we know it's a continuation. Hevu zehirin barashus. Be cautious with the rashus, with the government, with authorities, with rulers. She'ein mekarvin lo la'adam ela letzorech atzman. They only befriend you for their own benefit. Nirin ke'ohavim, they appear like friends. B'shas hanasan, when it's good for them, when it suits them. Ve'in omdin lo la'adam b'shas dochko, they do not stand by you in a time of need. 4 things that were said about relationship to government, to authorities, to people of power. The previous Mishnah we learned how important it is that Torah needs to be with derech eretz. You need to cultivate big business as well in the pursuit of excellence in Torah. Torah is the ideal, but it's not in a vacuum. It needs the support and it needs to infiltrate life. It requires normalcy. And that's what led Rabbi Gamliel to iterate the next clause. Yes, you need to carry, if you want. You need to court authorities, power brokers, big business, l'shem shamayim, all towards the positive end of nurturing and developing the excellence in Torah. However, it comes with a caveat. It said, although Torah requires derech eretz, and the oskim b'tzorchei tzibur, those who are looking after the interests of the tzibur, looking after the interests of Torah, are going to need to develop relationships with people in power. But nevertheless, be forewarned, the corridors of power are difficult mazes. Deal gingerly and respectfully, and keep a good distance from the brokers of power, because, as everyone knows, power corrupts. People in power, once they get to power, even if they were nice innocents to start off with, the power wields such a pressure over them that they will do anything to further their station, to maintain their authority, to maintain their position. it's not them. It's really that's just the trappings of power. Even good governments, they really are interested in themselves and their power first. And one shouldn't, even those who are oisek and sochet tzibur, those who are courting government because it's good for Torah, it's good for the Jewish people, they need to, they have to do that, hishtadlus, but they need to be aware fully that palgei mayim leiv melachim biyad Hashem, as Rabbeinu Yonah says, the future of the Jewish people is far too important, too significant in Hashem's world, in his plan. He's not going to leave it up to one American president or the other, or one party in America or any other country or the other. So yes, we fully appreciate, and they have been wonderful partners for the Jewish people, but ultimately we have to know they are messengers from Hashem, and our reliance as a Jewish people and as individuals, and even as we court the corridors of power to further the interests of the Jewish people, to further the interests of Torah, it has to be with the understanding that treat them cautiously. They're messengers, and they're messengers that have a bite. And it's important to learn what the Mishnah is saying, that a Yid has to talk Jewish. He has to place his confidence with Hashem. Doesn't matter who the president is. The Marzor Vitri, son-in-law of Rashi, he says that Rabbi Gamliel saw in his father, this is actually a part of his life story, his father, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, remember? The prince of the Jewish people, the leader of the Jewish people, who actually redacted the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the Mishnayos, into its written form. He had an incredibly close relationship, personal, dear, close friendship with Antoninus, the Gemara tells us, known in the secular world as Marcus Aurelius. And nevertheless, and they had a unique relationship, mutually beneficial. The day that Marcus Aurelius passed from power, forgotten completely. Another famous example is Don Yitzchak Abarbanel, who actually, as the head of the Minister of Finance in the King of Spain, personally lent them money to finance their regaining independence from the Christians who were in charge of Spain at the time. And ultimately, in 1492, he couldn't save his own people and even himself. He was able to get away himself, but he couldn't change anything. The Balfour Declaration, when it was signed, people thought, wow, the Mashiach comes in the form of Britain. It was swift in unfolding how almost cruel they were in limiting the escape from Europe. So politics, one has to know, all politics is about the survival of the politician, and they will do anything. You have to know that they will do anything in order to achieve that end, and that is the end, and that is the goal of politics. So even when you are forced to deal with them, understand, true friends, politicians do not make. The interesting question is, we understand this as a answer to those involved in good governance, but how does this bring us closer to Mili de Chasidusa, which we know that's what the Pirkei Avos is about, developing a Jewish character. And we know already, we've seen it, one needs to do whatever he can, if it's the right thing, as far as possible, avoid pursuing the golden trap of power because it does corrupt. Avoid being too close, because it's a pressure that power and the power mongers wield. They will cause you to act in a way that you don't want to. They will cause you to do against your better judgment. So our Mishnah is cautioning us. This is the first approach. Rashus, stay away from Rashus, authority, governance. It's the first important approach in our Mishnah, which many Meforshim take. Let's move on to a second one, a Musardika one by the Midrash Shmuel, the classic explanation. He says Rashus over here can mean something else entirely. The word Rashus, as we know, has two meanings, and they're related. The first one, Rashus, they are the government. They have authority They have permission, they have license to do whatever they want to do, so to speak. They set the law. That's the one explanation we've already spoken about. There's another pshat. It says the Midrash Shmuel, Rashus, as we also know, means voluntary, optional. And we think that the Torah is made up of asur and mutar, and everything in between is not a religious discussion, and the Torah doesn't have an opinion on it. For example, what color car I should drive, what color my pink car should be. Well, that's not a question. So whether I should drive a Toyota or a Rolls Royce, that's really not something that you have to ask a shaila on. It's not something that the Torah even has rulings on. That's how we usually think. We think that that's a separate category called reshus. There's mitzvah category, and then there's reshus. Reshus means voluntary, optional, things that I want to do. So it depends on me, whether I feel like it or not. Completely, it's not a religious discussion, we think. Says the Midrash Shmuel, he says that he doesn't think that's pshat in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is telling you something, or at least alluding to something. Perhaps he agrees that in pshat, the way we said the pshat until now is correct. But there's certainly an additional allusion. What is that? Hevu zehirim parashus. Be careful of this category that the Oilam says is optional, is voluntary. Because as the Chovos HaLevavos says, in truth, there's no gray when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to morality, there's no gray. Or as Rav Yitzchak Hutner, the famous Rosh Yeshiva in America, said, there's no Switzerland when it comes to service of Hashem. There's no neutrality. It's either in, because it furthers your ruchnius, your relationship to Hashem, your commitment to Torah, your family's commitment to Torah, or it's out. It's not neutral. We kid ourselves. Oh, where does it say in the Torah that? The witness says, in my Torah, it says all over the place, if it's going to further your identity as a person who's here to serve Hashem, and that's the real purpose of his life, articulated in a daily, meaningful way. If it enhances that, it's a mitzvah. You must do it. If it weakens that or neutralizes that, diffuses that, run. It's not reshus, it's asur. The Ramban famously talked about the novel Birshus HaTorah. Just because it's not a specific Avera doesn't mean the Torah doesn't have an opinion, doesn't mean it's not inappropriate or even ugly. And I think that perhaps the pshat of it is as follows. There's something you could, those things are mutar. You could pursue things that are mutar. But you have to realize as you're doing that, it may be legally mutar, but you're buying into the body as the center of your life. And at some level, you are distancing yourself from the neshama as the center of your being. And now that's a very important distinction. Because even if you leave out asur and mutar for a moment, which as we've seen, Rabbeinu Bachya says, if it's not enhancing, it's all asur. But even if we would leave that out for a moment, let's take it from another angle. When one pursues the body and comfort of the body and ease of the body as being one's chief joy in life, he's buying into something called the guf. And the guf has properties. It's an important distinction we need to make and note. The body has properties and the neshama has properties. If you ask, what are the properties of guf? Guf, the body, ages. It knows that it ages. It weakens. It's vulnerable. Guf is therefore inevitably anxious and fearful and angry and sad. That's just the nature of guf. You might distract it with a lot of pleasures in between so that you don't notice the process that's going on, but it'll catch up. That's how life is. It does catch up because the process is real. Guf has properties. It has a host of spiritual, emotional realities that go with it. Pleasure you can have in a limited way, in a transient way. Simcha you will never ever have, because simcha is not one of the properties of Guf. Physical pleasure is one of the properties of Guf. Simcha is one of the properties of Neshama. The more inspired you are, the more of a spiritual purpose you have, the more you articulate that, the more you emancipate that, to use a funny word, the more simcha you'll feel. Simcha is a property of the Neshama. The more neshamadik that you are, the more you have that. It's got a host of qualities. It's not anxious. It's trusting. It's emunah. It's calm. It's kind. It's not angry. It's exactly the opposite. And that's what our mission is teaching, at least alluding to. And according to the Midrash Shmuel, maybe even Pshat. Hevu zahirim barashus. Be cautious with that category of life activities that we call optional, voluntary, up to me. It's neither here nor there. Wrong. The consequences are as great and as impactful as all other parts of the Torah. It's got a language. The body has a language. The neshama has a language. Let's take another mahalach in this wonderful sugya. Hevu zahirin barashus. Be careful with the rashus. The Midrash Shmuel goes on to cite another comment. You know who the rashus is? It's public opinion. It's government. We've spoken about that. It's rashus. It's you. It's the voluntary, the optionals, so to speak. Now, third way, you know who else is called rashus? The public, the rashus harabim. They are the rashus. And you need to treat them with great respect. Why? Because the public is fickle and the public is self-interested. And when the officials of the public succeed on their behalf, they will get a grosser yeshakayach, not the whole yeshakayach, because the public is fickle. But should they fail, you are yesterday's hero. You are forgotten in a moment. It's life. They will abandon you. That's what the Midrash Shmuel sees in our Mishnah. Hevu zahirim barashus. Be cautious if you're working for the tzibur. Be cautious that you have certain gedarim to protect yourself. Always go back and consult. Always make sure that your tzibur is with you. It's a positive message, but it's got a sting in it also. Be careful of the rashus. It's not the same as a one-to-one engagement. When you're dealing with public opinion, it's just not the same. And therefore, you have to, someone said it as follows. Famous Rav once advised a dear friend of mine who was in the rabbinate. He said to him, it's very important, if you're working in the rabbinate, that you have a part of your life that's totally private. I don't know if he's right or wrong, but he said it. He said, you must have that because of what we're discussing. You can't make your entire identity, self-identity, or your self-dignity dependent on what the Rabbim thinks of you, because that changes. It's fickle. You're forgotten very quickly. So he advised him to do that. Maybe it worked for him, I'm not sure. But one thing I know for sure, Abba, Dad, was not like that at all. He did not have any part of his life that wasn't Avodas HaTzibur. So on the one hand, I think it's a very sharp comment that the Midrash Shmuel is bringing. Be careful dealing with the public. Know that it's not the same as one-on-one. It's crowd control. It's a completely different phenomenon. But that you should hold back and make your identity personal, all I can say is that's not how the Abba feared the Tish. My dad and Lahavdim, my mom, gave over all the kliches. It's teaching, it's the school, it's the politics of school, it's shul, it's the yidden, it's the home, everything. Avodas HaTzibur. He so much believed in it. He so much believed in it, knowing all well that the public is fickle. Treat him with great respect, but it doesn't mean withhold. He really was a public person. He was a eved to Am Yisrael till his last. That's what he wanted to be. That's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to be left off to go and pasture in the field peacefully and privately. It wasn't his idea of fun at all. But that's this story of the Midrash Shmuel. In conclusion, I'll just go back to the first parish of the Rashus, meaning the government. There's a wonderful, it's not a wonderful, sad story told about the Malbim, the famous Malbim, who was an incredible genius. He wrote Perushim on the Navi to show how every word that the sages said is not just a separate Torah. It's written into the Torah Shebitzal, into the Torah and Tanakh. If you would scientifically take apart the grammar, you would see everything there. He once went to represent his tzibur, his community in Paris, and he asked the local mayor in Bucharest for a letter introducing him. It will help him. It will enhance his efforts on behalf of the Jewish community. On the train, on the way, he second-guessed himself. He thought, do I really trust this mayor, what he's going to write? No, he said he's not such a friend of the Jews. He took the letter, he tore it up, and he put it in the waste. And he continued. He said, I'm not going to rely on him. I'm going to rely on Hashem. I'll do my bit. One of his Talmidim who was traveling with him took the letter out. And, unsurprisingly, it was a complete narrative against the Malbim, almost encouraging them to leave him out. So ultimately, we start Elul with this. A Yid talks to Hashem. A Yid relies on Hashem. A Yid does his service of the public with Hashem. And remember, as Elul comes and Rosh Hashanah starts to shine brightly, it brings out in each of us a different attachment to the neshama. That's where all of our special koiches and our special simcha lie. Wishing you all a good chodesh and mimele be'ezat Hashem, also a good gewenchte yor, and we can almost say kasiva v'chasima toiva. Thank you.
Beautiful and so inspirational. Thank you so much. Have a good night.